Can you hear me on there? Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. I'm trying to get some other people into the Hangout. We can have actual other people on here, and for some reason I can't get them in. We had this working once before when we play tested it, and one more try on this, and if not, I guess we will move on. Great. Okay. Sorry if I'm making you ill with the infinite recursion screen share, but so I was just trying to get this thing up and going. There are some kind of cool advantages to doing it this way, because we actually get this whole session will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel. And if you ask a question, I can do this and select the question, and now I'm actually answering Kate's question, which is not actually a question, but I'm answering Kate's question, and it will get called out in the video. When I say done, you'll be able to come back and look at the list of questions that were asked during the Hangout, click the button, and you'll go right to the response to the question. So it's very cool. It's just these issues with inviting people. But I'll go ahead and start. Great. Let me try this. Is everyone else hearing echoes, or is that just affecting in the lab? Go ahead and switch to a headset and see if this helps.
Hey guys.
Hey, look at that. There's someone else.
How about it? Unfortunately, it made me join under Internet Explorer.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, right.
That's weird.
I'm here.
Are you getting an echo from me, Tim?
No.
Okay, Justin, I think that that might be something going on with you. I'm not sure. And so it looks like, so we have a few people on. Well, good. Okay, we'll get this worked out. I think it'll be good. We just got to figure out the invites thing. So, oh, hi, Mahana. Okay, so let me go ahead. I'll go ahead with the presentation thing, and if we can get the lab in, we'll get the lab in, and if not, then not. No, if I have to bop over to my hip chat to get messages from the lab, then I'll do that.
I'll keep an eye on it too. Yeah. Just to throw it out there, the way I ended up getting joined is that it sent me an email, and I clicked on the link in the email.
Nice.
That's what got me in. It never came up in my Hangouts app or anything like that.
Okay, so Justin, give that a try as well, and
check
Dan
your email.
Come in. So, okay, well, thanks for being patient, and you could put that thing. Yep. Okay, so for a little week later, we've been working on some pretty cool stuff that we wanted to talk about. So the agenda today is development roadmap, just basically update on where we're at with our releases. We have a couple models at or near beta that there's a lot of interest in and that we want to talk about. And then the XNAT Automation Framework, and then any Q&A. So the development roadmap is it's basically the same as we had the last for our last one of these teleconferences, but we're going to have a 165 maintenance release. We've had a number of little things that have been going on since 164 was released. Especially security fixes, which was we had done in 164, performance fixes, and that was mostly Tim's work on the performance side, and I believe it was some caching. And do you want to talk about that for a second, Tim?
Yeah, from what I remember, it was a lot of stuff focused on the archiving process, so both on receiving files via DICOM send, as well as then archiving the files. So a bunch of performance improvements. Basically, I put that through a profiler and found any low-hanging fruit I could find to clean up.
And then some enhancements. So a few additions, some changes to, mostly it's changes to things that are already there, although there is some new functionality to affect that. And specifically, the series import filters have been, have been and are in the process of being built out and enhanced to deal with some specific issues that we have on some systems. So we can talk about that a little bit more because this is goes to the automation framework stuff. So 1.7 development's ongoing. You may have seen a couple posts in the discussion group about that. So we're close to moving all new XNAT coding to the 1.7 development tip. And when that happens, the effect of that on 1.6 will be that basically anything that needs to go into 1.6.5 or any kind of maintenance patches after 1.6.5 we'll do on the 1.6 development line and then pull up into 1.7. But the vast majority of our development work at that point will be on 1.7. And 1.6 will be strictly related to critical maintenance fixes and security fixes. The holdup right now with 1.7 is basically getting the configurations completely externalized and databaseized, for lack of a better term. We have currently in XNAT, there's a lot of stuff in configuration files, and you can go in and monkey with the with mail settings and all sorts of things like that. The other recent thread in the discussion group. The end goal for that is to have the only thing in a configuration file being the sort of your kind of key to the kingdom will be the database URL and credentials to access the data. Everything else will be stored in the database, and that's very close to happening. Once I'm done with the work that I'm doing on automation framework for some stuff that we need to have done, I'll be back on 1.7 and hope to get that actually probably next week. That's going to require some changes to module development patterns, but we'll document that. It actually ends up being better overall because you'll be able to compile your code, and the code will be compiled as part of the module build pattern, and so you can now have unit tests and whatnot for your module code. But again, like I said, we'll document that, and we'll provide some examples of Maven archetypes and maybe Gradle build stuff for it. It should be much easier to build, install, update, and extend 1.7 in general, because we won't have this, these things to go into the app and have to modify properties files and configuration files to get things integrated in. our goal is to make a module, really a module that you can just kind of stick off to the side and have it function properly. And it'll require some changes to what we're doing, but once those changes are sort of integrated into your development process, it should be a lot easier to do your work. Okay, so modules at or near beta. There are two primary ones. The protocols module, which are visits and protocols. We are close to going into a initial beta at an active site. We have a site that's starting up a new study, kind of concurrently with the time that we are working with them to get that study going and reaching a critical point of development on the protocols module. So we're focusing on the end user workflow and looking at making that REDCap-like, to take some of the ways of working with your subject population and the study protocol, give you visibility on what subjects have done, where they're at, when they are when they need to be doing things to stay within protocol, when they're in danger of falling out of protocol, and try to make this as easy for people like clinical research coordinators and other administrators of projects to get a view of the status of a particular study, in as few looks as possible. We'll be focusing more on protocol administration development. I should say administration and development after that beta release. We have kind of a workable but unsatisfying administration and development experience right now with the way the module exists, and some pretty clear ideas about how we want to make that work down the line. And so we'll be focusing on that after the beta, but our first goal is to get people who are going to actually be using this to deal with the subject population enabled. And the protocols, the whole concept of visits and protocols is going to be integral to XNAT in 1.7 and beyond, so that this support for being able to define a protocol and apply it to one or more projects and get reports on study protocol status is going to be something that's going to be a really central part of the XNAT 1.7 workflow. The image viewer has been kind of sitting out there for a while. We had a developer who was dedicated to it for a pretty good period of time, and he's actually left and is now working at Swedish in Seattle, and we have a couple people who look after it part-time, but we actually have people using it out in the field. So we've even gotten fixes from Erwin Vast at Erasmus in the Netherlands to deal with some of their data. And so we're getting it out and actually getting it to, viewing data in the field, with all the variance that implies, to make it, to test out the functionality. And it's been going well. We don't have much in the way of complaints or issues, and people are using it to view their imaging data. It's available on XNAT Marketplace as a well, it says that it's available on XNAT Marketplace as a module archive. It's not yet. I will be doing that later this week. I've been pulling the code and working with it, and I just haven't had a chance to get it up onto the marketplace.
Did we have some version of it up there?
No, we have an old version that's XIMG view. This will be XNAT image viewer. And so the code is way more advanced than what's up there, and that was marked as an alpha release. The next one will be a full beta. It's in very good shape. So I will archive the existing alpha that's up there, and do that later this week. And I'll send out a notification to the discussion group when that's up. But you can also go on to the NRGXNet GitHub, which is just github.com/NRGXNet. and we have it on GitHub because that is where it was being maintained by Sunil, who was working on it before. So it was easier just to fork it onto an XNAT account for that. So you can go up there and go and pull the full source of it and build it and install it directly off of that. If you're really excited to get it installed. It looks really good. It's much more usable and kind of friendly than the PlexiViewer app. The one thing that I would say is that we have not qualified it on the wide array of data that the PlexiViewer app has worked with historically. But PlexiViewer has the same issue that we have with all of our applets, which is that it's an applet. So, okay, so as far as that stuff goes on the development roadmap and the modules, I think there's really too much else to say about that. If anyone has any questions, you can chime in on that. But so I was kind of looking around for topics as to what what we could talk about that would be interesting, and Dan's like the automation, the scripting. So automation is a little bit of an opaque term, but it was the only thing that I could come up with that made sense for kind of the full range of what's going on in the in this framework. And I want to qualify this before we get into it that this is still under development, and we are we're actively working on it right now. A lot of the underpinnings of it are very well understood, but the way that we're kind of bringing things together is new, and so there's some really great things about that, and then there's some concerns about that, and I've got both of them called out. So, and if anyone does have any questions or anything, you feel free to click on Q&A on the presentation, and if a question comes up and I don't see it because I got the slideshow up, if someone could just Tim, if you can shout at me and tell me that there's a question. Okay, so. Automation provides the ability to handle events within XNAT in an automated way. So it is really a way to have the system do things for you. Right now we're in sort of a mode where outside of a few cases, for example, auto archiving or the auto run pipeline, outside of a few cases, it's kind of difficult to get XNAT to do things for you. You can make XNAT do stuff and it'll go off and do it. And then it's done, and now you want something else done, so you've got to go do that. Our goal here is to get things to happen, to start chaining these things together. When one thing happens, we want something else to happen at that point. So we want to update the project status when a new session's archived. We want to extract data from an uploaded resource. So right now you go to manage files and you upload something and it kind of stops there. Now you can go run a pipeline, and that pipeline can go and get the data from there and do something and create a new assessor or update a subject attribute or etc. But again, you're doing it by hand. Notify users when a pipeline step is completed. We already do this with the pipeline notifier, but what if we could do it by saying that on this project, once we get to a certain step in a pipeline, we need to notify the radiologist that it's time to go do a QC read, or we need to notify the project coordinator that we've completed some analysis of something. So,
and you can add a notification without modifying the pipeline itself.
Right. You can add a notification without modifying the pipeline itself, and the pipeline doesn't even know that it's notifying. So we don't have to go through the posting an email. We can handle the notifications now just on the basis of that pipeline status changing. So uses for this. Oh, whoa, what just happened there?
And we're done.
What in the world? it lost all my, I had like 4 slides on here. Oh, that's the wrong one. Hold on. That is my template that I was trying to make. Now let's go to here. Here we go. So I started off copying from that point, and I said I needed to make this template, and then, sorry about that. Boy, that was scary. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. This uses the, so it wasn't uses for this, it was uses, and then I started the template. This uses the JSR 223 specification, which actually didn't mean anything to me until a few weeks ago. But it turns out that back in 2006, as part of the Java 1.6 development process, someone decided they needed some kind of standard for how you can integrate scripting engines into a Java application. So they came up with JSR 223, and the automation framework initially didn't start by doing this. It started with just working with Groovy, being able to run Groovy, and trying to abstract some of the issues of dealing with that away. But it's now moved over, and it uses this the Java X.script API, and which means it's compliant with this specification. And that's very cool because there's a lot of stuff out there that works with it that you can just kind of haul in and use. So we currently support Groovy, which is if you're not familiar with Groovy as a language, it's a Java-like but not Java scripting language. That's a little more. It's a little bit easier, less kind of code looking. It's hard to describe, but it's fairly easy to work with, especially in kind of a lot of the basic ways of using it. JavaScript, and JavaScript is actually supported natively under every version of the JDK and JRE since Java 1.6. This is important because of one of the uses of the scripting engine that we are of these stored scripts that we use it for, is using JavaScript in the JRE, and specifically this is in the upload applet. We want to be able to look at a bit of DICOM and decide some stuff about this. It's the series import filters, but we didn't want to have to upload or bother downloading from the XNAT server to the applet client an entire scripting library, for example, like Groovy, which is 3 or 4 megabytes of code in the jar, and you have all this, this baggage that comes along with Groovy, which is fine on the server side, but is not so great on the client side. By using JavaScript that's already directly in the JRE, we can actually run these little scripts to look at DICOM and make decisions about it. And Python through the Jython framework. So that's not been tested or validated at all. I have some code written for it as a wrapper, but I haven't used it. And there are some limitations to the Jython that would affect, if you immediately go, oh, great, I can run Python directly. Anything like LXML, I know some of the SciPy stuff all rely on native extensions. In other words, C++ that gets compiled as part of developing, or as part of building the Python module. And when you go to, Jython does not support those native extensions. So you can't use LXML through Jython. You can't use anything else that has that sort of thing. There's also the possibility of Ruby through JRuby, but JRuby has some weird dependencies that causes everything to break, so we can't do that right now. There's the possibility of a number of other scripting languages as well that we haven't had a chance to look into. ClojureScript, possibly R, a number of things like that. But one thing that's worth noting is that this is not intended to do heavy lifting and heavy processing of data, because this is all going to run within the same process space as Tomcat. So you've got to be concerned about memory consumption and things like that. You can use it to launch other processes if you need to. But you don't want to run free surfer directly out of the scripting framework, for example. Lightweight analytics and stuff like that you can do. I'm missing a bullet point here, so let's see. There we go. So the automation framework consists of two primary mechanisms, which is event handling and script management and execution. So event handling is where automation is instigated. Something happens and the system notices. And we've got these separated out so that we can reuse scripts across the system. So basically, and we'll look at this in a minute, we're going to have a demo in here. You can write a script. We've got a code editor built directly within XNAT. You can write a script and save that, and then now you've got a collection of scripts that are in your XNAT. And then you can map an event, which is basically a pipeline status, and associate it with something. You can associate it with the site, or you can associate it with a particular project. And technically in the framework, you can associate it with almost anything that exists in XNAT. But right now, we only have direct support for site and project. And then assign a script to handle that event. And now, if you say, so when you have an auto run on this project, run this script. And that happens. And that's actually one of the exact examples we'll look at. Man. Back up here. Okay, so I need to delete these two bullet points. So we use the existing workflow state. I can't even remember exactly what the property is called. What is it, Tim? Is it
status?
Is it status?
Yeah,
no, because status is complete. We look for the complete status, and then we look at something else, pipeline name, maybe.
Oh yeah, pipeline name to know what, yeah.
Yeah, so we actually use pipeline name, even though there might not be a pipeline involved at all. And we'll probably try to make this stuff, we'll either migrate the API or do something else down the line so that it's not confusing. But basically what happens is a pipeline the way that it's always worked is a pipeline says, okay, I'm running. I have done this. I have done that. I've failed. I've queued. I've completed. And then you've got this pipeline name and a status. So what we do now is we look at the whenever you update one of these workflow statuses, we look at the status and we say, is it completed? And if it's completed, then we look at the pipeline name, and that's essentially our event. And so we can say, if the auto run is completed, this thing's happened, and let's go and look and see if we've got a trigger associated with this. So that's now the next thing is automation is instigated by a trigger. So an event happens, our auto run is completed to an entity. This happened in a particular project, which triggers a script. Maybe. So if we do have this event associated with this entity, it will have a script. So it's kind of a three item compound key: event, entity, and script. So if you think about something happens to a thing, then go do this. So these triggers can also be combined into what we call trigger templates, so that you can build up these sets of event mappings. We know that for a project of a particular type, when we get when auto run is completed, we want to notify the radiologist that they need to come do a QC read. When the QC read is completed, did it pass? If so, notify the clinical coordinator that the images are ready. If it failed, notify the clinical coordinator that they need to reschedule a session in the scanner for the subject or whatever it is that you need to do. Or you could also use it to, once the radiologist has read and passed the QC, maybe at that point, what you really want to do is launch a pipeline. That's when you're going to launch your free surfer pipeline. We want to wait until we've got the QC. The radiologist like, this is a good enough set of images for us to use to run our free surfer on it. They say, okay, and then now we launch the free surfer. Free surfer comes back in. A couple days later, we update that pipeline status. We see that event on that project, and it triggers a new script which says to whoever needs the free surfer data, hey, you've got free surfer data available for use. So, you know, you can see how you can take these different things happening in the system, start to chain them together, and now we've got this whole workflow that at every point along the way has previously required someone going and clicking on something happening in this chain. So the automation service can also be used without events. And current implementations of automation not associated with events include, oops, sorry about that. The scripted session label extractor, and that's kind of a horrible name, but it's what it is. And we'll have a look at that, and I'll show you how it works and what its purpose is. The modality map series import filters, and that was kind of what triggered off the need for JavaScript in this case. So, and just to when we look at this, you'll see you can put scripts. You can use this, just the scripting functionality, to embed scripts in various places in your functionality to make things happen in an automated way. What it lets you do is have some baseline functionality, right? You have a framework there that does stuff, but you're not quite sure how you want to do it. Or, you know, you're going to need to change how this code works, maybe on a project by project basis. And that's what the scripted session label extractor is for. So we've got a label extractor for the gradual DICOM importer. And normally we've just kind of always gone along. We look at the subject name, and we kind of tack a modality on there, and then figure out, do we already have things with this name, and increment the number, and boom, there's your default session label. But in certain cases, we found we needed to do, in some cases we needed to change how we were doing that, but we didn't want to have to do all of these different extractors and receivers and all this stuff to make that work. Instead, what we can do is associate different scripts with different projects, and that script will help you can use to take the label name and change it based on data that is in the actual DICOM object. So this is using the DC and Prochet library to look at the DICOM and then say, no, we want to have, this one's going to be, MR is fine. This is actually a pet session. So we're going to call this, you know, subject label underscore pet1. So it's actually very exciting stuff. So security issues are a concern. So if you're watching all this and you're like, yeah, that's great, and what's going to stop someone from doing system.exit -1 and killing my Tomcat? And the answer is, that's a great question. Right now we have two approaches to handle this. Scripts are only editable and viewable by administrators. So you can't have someone, you know, a collaborator on a project come in and create a script that's going to do, you know, cause havoc. Now, it's a legitimate argument that, well, can you trust administrators even if they're not doing something intentionally harmful? They could do something unintentionally harmful because they may not be coders and they may not know what they're doing, which is valid. You know, right now we basically are going to trust the administrator to not do that. But by release time, we're going to have a sandboxing framework integrated into the automation library, and you basically won't be able to, or whenever you run a script, and we've got a whole framework for running, for managing how that works, you'll have a sandbox that comes along automatically. You'll always be executing through the sandbox. And so by sandboxing and setting up the security manager properly, when you go to execute these process threads for the scripts, you can shut down what that script is allowed to do. You can shut it down so that you can't exit. You can shut it down so you don't have access to the entire hard drive, things like that. Now, you could configure a sandbox that basically gives you carte blanche. And that is a completely valid thing to want to do. You're like, look, I really need this script to be able to go out to this location on our local drive, move some things around, call another service, and then go delete this. Look, I need to be able to do that. That's what I need to be able to execute myself. Okay, fine. So in particular scenarios, you set up this very permissive sandbox, and and take that responsibility on, basically. And then for everything else, for simpler stuff, you restrict where the user who's executing that script has access, what they can do, what they can see, things like that. So there's nothing built into it right now because there's a lot of different approaches to this right now, and we've yet to settle on what exactly how we want to do it. If we want to write our own from using the Java Security Manager, or there are some frameworks out there that are in various states of development or undevelopment. And so, listen, by the time we release this stuff, we will have a sandbox framework integrated into it. Okay, so go ahead and go look at some of this stuff because it's pretty cool. Oops, wrong one. Make sure I don't have a breakpoint set. Okay. Deactivate these for the moment and just walk through what things look like at the beginning. So, okay. So to start, the first thing you need is a script, right? We have actually, this stuff is all managed through REST. So you can do a lot of the script management and trigger and trigger template management through the REST API. So all of this stuff is working through that. You just stop. So let me look here. Okay, so this is basically hello world, because you got to do a hello world, right? This is it. We're going to write something out to this file, and that's it. We're not looking at any parameters that come in on to the script. We're not looking at actually touching any XNAT objects or anything like that. Oh, sorry. Better? Yeah, I can. I'm a big fan of small text anyway, and then I always forget. People hate it, and so if you can't see, just poke me. So that's actually one of it. So here's our hello world. And what we're going to do is just open up a file called temp.out.txt and just say hello. And we can modify it so you can I guess it didn't see the original, so it doesn't really make much of a difference, but there you go. So we're going to go ahead and write out to it and then close it, and then something should show up in a little bit. So as it happens, I baked this cake earlier, cooking shows. We have an event set up for this XNAT project. When we do auto run, we're going to run that same script. Let me go ahead and I'll delete it just so you can. Oh, I guess I won't. We might have some. Oh, you know what it is? It's this slash. That slash messes up the REST URI. So I won't delete it. But I can show you what it. This is what setting up an event handler looks like. So we have an event, and we can say, let's say we have. Let's modify a subject, and we'll do. Well, this won't really do that much. We'll just do this. Let's see what happens. And so these are the two of the three things that go into a script trigger that I was talking about. We've got an event. We've got the script that's going to run with that event. The third thing is the entity ID. And in this case, the entity ID is supplied because the entity ID is XNAT 02. It's the project. And this is a bug in the modal framework that I found last night. Remember, this is all the development tip. So if we modify a subject, actually this stuff should still happen. So let's go see if that happens.
Rick, when you're done with the demo, remind me that Kate had a question, but we can do it after demo.
All right, well done. So here's our temp folder right now. There's nothing in it but kind of standard temp folder stuff. So I'm going to try modifying the subject. And I'm also going to, just so you can see, bring up these breakpoints here. I actually don't want to look at these right now. Look at I had it open earlier. Do you remember which one it is, Tim? Is it this? It's not the request. Is it the request listener? No. That's the this trigger. It's this one here. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to enable this breakpoint, and so I just want to show you this. Basically, this guy catching an event. What happens when we get this event? So let's say. Okay, so I just saved this user. We got to the work status here. Sorry, this is small, I know.
So are you the only one who can answer questions on the board? I don't seem to be able to answer them.
I think you can.
I'm clicking around, but nothing. Okay.
I'll show you here real quick. I have this select on the questions, so I could. So basically, I just go select.
I don't have this select. Okay.
Okay. I don't know why. I would like it to be able to do that, but okay. So in here we've got the our status is complete. So we finished this workflow, and the external ID in this case is going to be. This is actually our project ID. That's going to map to our entity ID in this case. So we're going to say, do we have a script for this external ID, XNAT 02, and this pipeline name, which in this case is modified subject. So that's our event. Like we said, that pipeline name is a proxy for the event ID. And we're going to go in and get scripts, and it turns out we do have a script. And so if we look at the script, you see it's our. I don't know if I can make this any bigger. I don't think I can. I can't make this stuff bigger. But it's basically the script ID is log info, that thing that we looked at, and there's the file, new file, temp, out.txt, the code for it, and everything for that script. So now it's going to go ahead and it queues the scripts. It doesn't just run them. So we put them up on a queue, and the MQ will deal with it. So that's a mechanism to basically kind of control the event handling workflow in a way so that you don't get 1,000 things all trying to run at the same time. You can fling them all up in the queue, and they will go through and be executed basically in the order received. Most of our kind of intensive workload in XNAT is now managed that way, from pre-archive import to session archiving and deleting and moving and all that stuff. So through this automated script request, and we fired it off. And so now what happens? Well, now we wait. And it might actually take a little bit to get it to show up before that script gets executed, and it actually shows up out here and closed out. So it actually, I thought it wasn't working earlier, and it just took a while for it to show up. So we'll check back with that in a second.
Is that maybe the length of time the MQ is configured to listen?
It's got to do, I think, with the, I just noticed this last night because some of the other stuff that I'm going to show is on demand. So I was like used to it happening right away. So I haven't figured out exactly where the latency is at. It could be in the queue. It could be in how it's rendering out to I honestly don't know. Since I only noticed it last night in this particular case, because, but it does show up. You know? So for things like this, it's not something obviously where you need this immediate feedback. That's where cases that are not automated are basically synchronous. So if you have this synchronous need, like we'll look at the automated session or the scripted session label extractor, that has to happen now. So it's just, there's no need for an event and bubbling and throwing things around and letting them go. You need it now, so you just call the script now. Try one more time. Okay, so while we're letting that cook, let's look at the scripted session assignment extractor. And this was actually the first thing that we did with this stuff. And what this, the thing that prompted the need for this is we have a really cool scanner that is a Siemens PET MR scanner. It produces a session that combines DICOM series of PET modality and DICOM series of MR modality. And that is a good thing, except that a lot of the tools that we have for dealing with these kinds of data are set up to work with PET, or they're set up to work with MR. And they just don't know what to do with something where there's PET and MR in the same thing. Now in XNAT, we have a combined PET MR session data type that combines, you can have a PET MR scan data, or I'm sorry, a PET scan data and an MR scan data mixed in the same session. And I think we also have a PET MR scan data type, but I think we went to using the appropriate modality for each one. But a lot of the tools just don't care for that. So it turned out that the scientists who are working with this data, they were taking these sessions and manually splitting them into two, which was a huge pain in the neck because they're really, really large studies. So, well, why can't we do that just as it's being received coming off the scanner? And well, we could just look, and if it's PET, we could throw it over, and if it's MR, we could throw it over into another one. For a number of reasons, that ended up not working, including the fact that there's an MR series that needs to go with the PET because it contains PET attenuation data that has to go with the PET session. It's not really related to MR, and I don't know why they call it MR anyway, but they do. So there you go. So we said, well, we need to be flexible in how we deal with this. So we created the scripted session assignment extractor. And at first, it was really just a chunk of Groovy embedded in here that we were running with the Groovy script engine. And then we decided that was way too inflexible. So we have since kind of built up this whole thing around it, where we can get different variables off of the out of the DICOM, and we create this event here, and the event is basically an event that never occurs. We just use it to make the trigger so we can get the script. So when that happens, let me see where we'll go get the script in here. This is the script. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is it. So we'll have a look at this real quick. Remember, this is all still in development. So we're going to send this to this session. And it's just a very small MR series. And I actually won't end up doing anything in here because I don't have a mixed pet MR. But you'll see the how it works. We go and send it, and now we hit here in the scripted session assignment extractor. And this works exactly the same way the old extractor works. It gets a little bit of data about what's going on first, and then it calls this super.extract here. Sorry, let me make this larger for you again. This super extract call is calling exactly the same method that that names your DICOM object, the file for receiving your frame right now in XNAT. So right now we've got the name, and that name is down here, and you can't see that, but it's XNAT 02.001 MR4. That's what we specified in the DICOM. That's the default value. We're going to say, so for this project, do we have a script? And this get script function here just says it knows that it's looking for this DICOM import event. It knows it's looking for either the project or the site, and it looks to see if it gets a script, and it does have a script. And see that we have an object for this here. And what the script does is it says, I received a default value for running this thing, and I'm going to give it a name, default value, hi there. So we're going to change the name a little bit. So if we don't have a script, we'll return that default value, but we do. So we pass these things in. Now in that script I showed you, it said we had, actually let me bring this up since we've got it here. And I'm going to make DICOM browser mad in a second here because it will want, it's going to time out. But on the content here for this, I received a default value of default value. And this here is a way of referring to a variable in Groovy and just embedding it into a string. And same thing with this here. So we're going to take this default value. You can see we're passing that in here. This is where it gets that value for default value. It also gets this DICOM object. And this is a DCM for Shay DICOM object instance. And so in this script, we could access the DICOM object and get DICOM header values out. And that's the way that in practice, this thing works. We can go in and we can look at the modality of this DICOM object. And we can look at some other things that will tell us. If it's PT, we're going to make this a pet, put it into a pet session. If it's MR, we're going to put it into an MR session, unless some other thing we find indicates that this is our pet attenuation data, in which case we're going to put that in the pet session. And we'll just modify the script label based on that. So we run that script. And that was kind of slow, so you can go, oh, that's slow. On the first instance of running the script engine, I just restarted Tomcat before the teleconference. It takes a while to spin it up, but basically once the engine's up and going, it's available now for use, and so subsequent executions are quite quick. And we get a result, and our result is, let me float over that. Our result is our old default value with hi there attached to it. That's what our script did. So we return the string back out, which is just the label with hi there, and now we're going to return that. And pass that on. So DICOM browser got upset because it couldn't get the second one out and everything timed out. But if we go back over here, look at our pre-archive, you see we're receiving that, and there's that session label. And what will happen, the way that this works for splitting up the PET and MR sessions, like I said, we make these decisions based in the script. And the nice thing about it is we can change this script based on whatever our current understanding of the incoming data, look at this DICOM object. And you see here, this is what I was referring to. We've got the DICOM objects. These are just the calls on the DC infra shade DICOM object class. Get string, get the SOP class UID, get the modality, get the series description. And then look at these things. Look at our modality, compare it to the SOP class UID. Make all these decisions about, is this a PET or is this an MR? Is it something else? We could do something else if we wanted to. And we'll give it a return value. And like you saw, when we put this return value down here, that comes back and that extractor looks at it and says, this is my session label. And when that happens, the pre-archive, we actually made a change in the pre-archive. The pre-archive used to always route, if it found the same study instance UID, it would just route you there. It didn't matter. Nothing else mattered. You could create another session label or anything, and it would put you into the table, the entry in the pre-archive table with that study instance UID. Now it keys off of a couple things, including the label. That means that we'll have two separate studies going in, one called XNAT 02-001 MR1 and one called XNAT 02-001 PET1, based on the return value that's specified in here, because we basically use that study instance UID and the session label as kind of our unique keys. There's another thing in there as well. I can't think of what it is, that differentiates the rows in the pre-archive table. And boom, like magic, just by doing this, we've split our incoming PET and MR into two separate sessions that then basically now our scientists can go in and get their MR and get their PET and work with it the way that they want to work with it. So I think you can see where you can do a lot of cool stuff with this just by getting in and looking at the DICOM as you're coming in, and finding out stuff about it. And that is kind of the next step in what we're doing with this. And I don't have this. I've been working on this over the past couple days. I don't have it working yet to show in the upload applet, but I'm going to show you some code in our unit test that show how it will work for the upload applet, which is not as great, I admit, but I think it'll make it kind of clear what we're doing. So we have in 164, we have the notion of series import filters, and they've been in 164. They're real straightforward. It's lines of text. Each one of these is a regex. And if your series description matches that regex and the series import filter is a blacklist, that series is not going through. So if you've got a patient consent in the series description, we're not going to let that in. Or you could say, you know what, for this project, I only want my fMRIs and rate. So that's the only thing we have projects where the only thing that we care about coming in from our studies are those types of series. All the rest of them are useless to us. So we don't want to transfer that data. We only want to transfer, and it ends up being 3 or 4 series for each study that will match these patterns. So we're going to whitelist it. Now this is at the site level. The same functionality exists at the project level. And that's cool as long as what you want to do is dependent only on the series description matching particular regex. But if we go back to the pet MR scenario, that's not adequate because we know that we want to do, we want to allow for if we're bringing in a pet study, oops, if we're bringing in a pet study, we want to allow anything that is a modality PT and or modality MR and the series description matches a particular series description or maybe an SOP class UID that indicates that this is our pet attenuation data. Now we've got to make this Boolean decision. That's not, you can't make it as a regex. So we added this concept of a modality map, and this lets us do a lot of really cool things because we can say, we can kind of ask it two separate questions. We can say, here's a thing. I want to only get MR this time. Is this okay? And it can go look and see, does this series match the things that would make it a valid MR? Or we can say, here's a thing, what is it? Of all the modalities that you have, what is this? And so what one of these looks like is like this. So this is the representation of a whitelist filter in JSON. And so here's your regexes broken up by new lines. Here's a blacklist. Your regex is broken up by new lines. A modality map has a mode saying that it's a modality map, and then it's got one kind of keyword which is excluded, and we might have another. We might be adding another in, which is this default. Says that if it is, if you can't figure out anything else, then just make it MR. We haven't run across a use case for that yet. We think that there might be, but we haven't come across it yet, so we haven't done it. But we have this one thing that says excluded, which means no matter what, it's basically its own version of blacklist. No matter what, if we match this, then don't include this thing. So I can't remember what this one was supposed to. Oh. This is saying that if we're going to test the burned in annotation DICOM header, and if it matches yes, so this is basically a regex pattern. We're going to do a case insensitive. It's a case insensitive regex pattern for yes. So you can be capitalized yes, lowercase yes. Given this, test the value for this. If this is true, you're excluded. Everything else is just a modality. And if you match this expression in order, you're this modality. So in other words, if you are, we're going to start with PT. And we're going to go in and say, we're going to fill in these tags. And we've got a little bit of a pseudo language here. Did someone say something? We have a little bit of a pseudo language here, which is this pound word pound. And basically what this is we go through and we do a token replacement on the strings. We will pull that out and then say, okay, the stuff between pound, we're going to get the tag corresponding to this from the DC tag class. So modality, series description, burned in annotation, these are all in the in that DC tag class, and you can see them all in the Java doc for that. And we're going to substitute the value that we find for our current object that we're working with. We're going to substitute it in here. So let's say if we get an MR, we're going to go, okay, modality is MR. And modality is MR. And series description is so this is going to, and then we just evaluate this expression. And the way that we evaluate it is as JavaScript. It's just a little chunk of JavaScript that returns a true or false. And this is kind of magic because You see, this is a very lightweight comparison because we're just doing some string comparison. And as I mentioned earlier, the JavaScript engine is built into every JRE from 1.6 on. And it's all pretty standard JavaScript. It's the Rhino JavaScript engine. So this stuff just executes in no time. So to think about how we can use this and why this is really valuable, on the upload applet can go back to XNAT and say, okay, we've made some changes to say what modality you're going to be downloading. Before you ever launch the upload applet, you have to say, I'm sorry, uploading. Before you launch, you say, I'm going to upload an NMR study. That's what I'm doing this time. I'm going to upload a PET study. That's what I'm doing this time. Okay, so now the applet says, okay, well, I know the project you're doing this in. Do we have a modality map that I can use, or a series import filter that I can use to decide what I should be showing? And you can do it at the project level or at the site level, and it will all resolve kind of magically when you do the REST call. You're like, I'm looking for this project. If there's not one for that project, and there is one for the site, you'll get it back, and it doesn't say this is for the site. You just get it. This is what you need to comply with. Okay. Now I know that I'm looking for MR, and so all I need to do is look at these two things, excluded and MR. First, does the thing that I just looked at match excluded? If yes, then stop. I'm not going to include this. Does the thing that I am looking at match MR? If no, throw it out. If yes, keep it in. When we think about how the upload applet works, it says you browse to a folder and you say, I want to import the data from here. It walks those folders and finds all of the DICOM under there and collates it into one or more studies. And if you've got one or more studies, you got to select a study and work with that. Well, if you imagine a folder where you have all this mixed PET and MR data, it goes through and it says, does this match my filter? Is it MR? No. So if you have 40 series and 15 of them match your MR criteria, what you end up seeing is just 15 series. That's your study. That's your MR study that you're going to upload now. You don't even see the PET and you don't upload it. The same thing obviously goes in reverse for PT, for the PET. You'll meet the requirements for this PET modality. And if it's thumbs up, now you get your series for those, and you're going to see those 20-something series and none of the MR. You go to upload, and it's going to come in, and it's going to be your PET session as its own standalone. Now, you may or may not have these kinds of requirements for your data, but you may have other ways that you want to filter stuff. So if your series blacklist is more complicated than the series description, then this is what you want. You can do away with this. You can say just exclude everything that has whatever the things that you want to exclude are. Or you can say that I'm not even going to consider in this project anything that doesn't have this SOB class UID or have one of these particular descriptions or one of these particular whatever the criteria is that you want to be able to filter on, because you know that for this project we only care about these 4 things. We only care about these 4 types of incoming scans. We don't care about this other stuff, and that's all we want to upload. And we want to make it easy for the user. Why go through uploading 20 gigabytes of data when really we only care about 1 gigabyte of it? But it gives you this much finer control over the type of data that will match the needs of this particular project than something like the blacklist, which is useful in a lot of scenarios, but also doesn't cover a lot of them. So now the modality map filter does something else for you as well that we are going to work on, which is to go back into the gradual DICOM importer and be able to put these series filters, instead of doing the scripted session assignment extractor, to be able to integrate these, to be able to integrate this sort of thing into into the actual import process, and know based on the series import filter applied to a particular project as these things are going in where they should be routed automatically. It's a little more complicated in that situation because this way we can determine what we consider to be PET and MR, but do you want to split them? Maybe you don't. Where this really becomes valuable, though, I think, is we haven't written this part of the code yet, but we know we need to do it. You think about a session that might go into an unassigned project. It doesn't have a project as it comes in because it's just coming off of an old scanner and no one can modify the DICOM headers, and it's always got to be done by hand. There's the potential to be able to figure out, based on something in the data, what project it should be going to. But that would require modifying the project assignment extractor. And then at the point where you have something unassigned and it needs to go into a project where we want to do something like this, where we want to filter out some data, where we want to split it into PET or into MR, we can do that based on this the modality map filter for that project at the point where you archive the data. So we get this whole thing pre-archived, and because we don't know where it's supposed to go, or someone mistyped the project ID on the scanner when they're sending it, or for whatever reason it gets in the pre-archive, it's not assigned to the right place, and this didn't get run on it as it was coming in. We can then go back and apply this to it as it's being archived. That gives us the opportunity, and the whole point of this burned-in annotation exclusion right here is because those burned-in annotations are very often, and in some projects, always associated with PHI. Those burned-in annotations mean that they've put the subject name or patient name, a subject identifier that can be tracked to the actual person in there, and we never want a frame with that in there. So, obviously your data requirements will vary, but that's what this is aimed at. And if you had that at the point where you go from the pre-archive, where you didn't know where this data was going, on the archive operation, then before you've already had PHI in the system, but you can get rid of it as soon as possible. Before we go to archive, before we have this sort of kind of canonical record of the data, we can get rid of it at that archive point. So, okay. I think
inject a question here.
Yes.
So it was actually Mohano who had the question earlier. So she was asking about could there be event triggers on the completion of individual steps in addition to the completion of an entire pipeline? That was question one. Question two is, for email notifications, can attachments be sent? So in terms of the completion of pipeline versus a step, yeah, I think the workflow listener, it might take some work. The workflow listener that we have right now is only looking for completed workflow events. You'd have to add a second listener that would look at ones that were just modifying the step or something like that. It'd be a little tricky to do, but it is feasible.
Well, or I mean, we can also have the main issue with that is we want to be careful about how often we're querying. So if we're going to be going through a whole bunch of different statuses, then we'll do a query in every one of them. Now that's not so bad, because this stuff is all running through. We have it all cached.
And you'd be filtering them based on the pipeline name. You'd only be
So there might be certain ones where we know that ways that we could build a table that says we are concerned, kind of like a composite key, saying that for auto run complete is really the only thing that we recognize. Mm-hmm. But for free surfer this status, and free surfer that status, and free surfer the other status, those are all points at which we want to have scripts associated. There's definitely no reason we can't do that.
Now, the email attachments, I think what she's looking for there is to be able to actually send stuff that was calculated in the pipeline
Right.
as an attachment. That's a lot more tricky because the only thing technically that you have in scope there is just the workflow object. And
Right.
so if the data isn't stored in the workflow object, then it isn't in memory. Now, you could at that point go out to your build directory and look for files in your little code there. You could have your Groovy script could go look for the files, and that's feasible to do. It's just a little more expensive.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the answer is that it really is up to you in terms of how much intelligence you build into both the script and into the, and this is something I think that's going to be like a developing process. How much you can get into the, from this status at this point, which includes the workflow entry, and get that passed into your script. So if we go over to, let me see, so we got the script request. Okay, so the automated script, these requests are basically the requests that are passed off to the MQ handler. This is what gets queued. So we pass these things along. So we've got access to quite a bit of stuff here. This is the thing that the workflow is on. We've got quite a bit of stuff that we can use to track to, and then we get to request listener.
But generally speaking, anything you can write in Java, you can do.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically going to get at. So in here, we build this context. It's just a map of things. So we know the user, we know the workflow ID, Groovy workflow ID, script workflow. We need to change that. Data ID, I'm not quite sure what that is. External ID is the thing that you were working on.
No, the data ID is the thing that you're working on. External ID is the project that it belonged to.
Oh, okay, that's right. I get those confused every time. The data type is the type of the thing that you were working on. So that is sort of a way of being able to say, we've got a project and the project ID is this. We've got a session and the session ID is this. We've got a subject and the subject ID is that. And then we've got the workflow. So we pass all these things in, so at the point where the script starts to run, these all exist as objects in the scope of the script that you can address. So anything that you can get off of these things through XNAT, you can access in the script. What I think will happen as we go along is that we'll figure out. I mean, I've thought about some ways of doing this, and just haven't really done any of it yet because we're still, we're building the bridge. We haven't put any of the lights and flourishes and stuff on it yet. But would be ways for pipelines and things within XNAT to pass data objects into the script. So you have a data object that is unique to this thing that just happened, that it passes into the script, and the script is sitting there, and when it gets started, it's there to receive it. It knows that data object is going to be coming in, and if it's not coming in, then something went wrong, and it can't do its work. So all that is to say, yes, we should be able to do emails with attachments. It just requires some framework integration. We've already got a full mail service built within XNAT. So there's a number of different approaches to how we might do that, which is who should I notify, and then I can just make a call and say, here's the location of my attachment, and let the framework go off and do it. Or the script could go and resolve the path of the file, create a mail object, attach it, and do the send through the mail service. So there's a number of different ways that you can do it. Like Tim said, it's code at this point. At the point you get into that script, it's code, and it will be reliant on the restrictions on the sandbox for your script. So certain things that have a much more restrictive sandbox that they're executing within will be able to do much fewer. I don't know, fewer things than scripts that are running in more permissive sandboxes. So you could be in a situation where you are running in a sandbox that won't let you do that. We kind of think that it will be, for the most part, you'll have access to a lot of XNAT from within the scripts. But so, like I said, that part is unresolved, and that's something that's got to be figured out. Okay, I'm trying to do this. So it's a cool thing about this is when you go back and you look at the video later, it will have the questions on the listed on the side, and then you can click on those questions. It'll take you right to the answer for them. So,
did you see Brian's question there?
Brian's question. Oh, I just did.
Most of the other ones there aren't actually questions. If
yeah.
you could somehow get rid of them, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can show you that. That is so now a caveat on that. So these are so when we showed you this code in here, we are looking at this. Okay, this is our proxy for an event ID. Well, that's what you're seeing then in this drop down. We're going out to the workflow table, and we're saying, basically select unique, whatever that column name is from workflow data, and return that back out. And that's what we're displaying. So in other words, there's all kinds of events in the system right now that you could put an event map on, put an event handler on, that are completely legitimate, that have a possibility of happening. They just haven't happened yet because this is a development machine. Right? I don't do all of the wide array of operations that an actual operational deployment does. So when you look at this on an operational deployment, or like even a test server that we've got people hammering on, you're going to see a lot more events. So that's a problem because first off, the pipeline name is not actually really a great proxy because we'll have pipeline showing up on there. Well, we don't want the FreeSurfer pipeline to, maybe we do, the FreeSurfer pipeline to be an event, but we kind of want it to be a class of event. And
it's kind of like the script : log info. You'd also want pipeline : FreeSurfer or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so we want to have, so we've actually already got this idea of a kind of a class of an event, which is script : login info, and then these other things that happen. This is all kind of a offshoot of, basically when Tim was working on, I think basically it was the audit trail, right?
Yeah, it started before the audit trail, but yeah, that's what really filled it out.
Yeah. So basically, we needed something to track what was happening with stuff, and so the workflow kind of became. It went from just tracking the state of each of your running pipelines to tracking the state of stuff.
It's basically, I imagined. For a long time, I've imagined that we would go back and build a task API. We were talking about that really actively back when I was doing this, because the first one was in 1.5, XNAT 1.5. It was the session. It was the renaming of a session got wedged in the workflow too, because it was the only place we had to put it, and all the workflow events were already showing up as the history on the session page. So we're already kind of using that table as the history. I thought we would come back and rewrite that and have it something that took its place, but we've just never gotten back to it.
Yeah. So it's a practical but imperfect kind of stand-in for what we actually want, and certainly by 1.7 we will have a system that just functions to do that. Because if you think about it, you need to be able to define and map these things well before they ever happen, especially for module development. You know that your module is going to bake cookies. That's what it does, man. It's a cookie baking module. And so you need to go in, and the first thing that you do after someone installs this module and starts up the server is, hey, I need to map the cookie baking event to this script, and then anyone can use it however you want to do it. They need to know that the cookies are baked event is a thing. And so, when you start up, first thing you do is go, if there's not a cookies are baked event, add this cookies are baked event. And then now the administrator comes in and is like, oh, look, I need to put this in so that we can have everybody come in the lab when the cookies are baked. Even though you've never done that before. So it needs to exist. So that's something that we need to work on. Now, but what I will say is you can, through this UI, you can only do events that are already there in the pipeline name. Through the REST API, and this stuff over here, actually it's a script, I got some event mapping stuff in here somewhere. So like the DICOM import event. The DICOM import event is, that's what I'm going to add for the session label extractor that I demoed before. It's not a pipeline name. It's this particular event, and actually this whole thing here is a little bit of a shorthand that says, here's an event, here's a script, and here's some stuff about that script, and this will actually create the script trigger for this event and this script. So I think that works. Anyways, so it kind of does dual duty, but now this DICOM import event would be up there as an event, even though it doesn't show up as a workflow state anywhere. No, and that's how when it goes to get the when it goes in. I always forget which one this is in. Oh, it's no. This one. When here it goes in this get script, and it goes to get this script based on the entity and the event, and the event is the DICOM import event. It's looking for this combination of scope and project ID and an event to see if it has a script associated with that event. That's how that event gets there, and that whole association that's built. Eventually, we'll have it so that you don't have to bring up a REST client to be able to do that. That's part of that whole process. So this is obviously not. But remember, this is 1.7 development. So
it brings up the question: how much of this will be available in 1.6.5?
Pretty much all of it. But pretty much all of it will be available in 1.6.5. It's already available in the dev stuff. What will be available and easily accessible is another matter. And so I think, for example, for the event stuff, I'm not quite sure what to do about that. I mean, I think we need an answer before 1.6.5 goes. I think we need to have some way to get these things out and extended, and that might mean kind of manually creating a workflow entry that's complete, my event, something like that, so that you can then attach those to projects and subjects. But this stuff is already in the 1.6.5 dev tip. And the series import filter stuff will be in there as well. The JavaScript based, I don't have the modality map in there yet, so, and those will be in there. It will be a lot more. It will be a lot more extensive and a lot more well integrated, I think. I hope for 1.7. But the engine and the editors and all this stuff is already in there. We need to enhance some of this stuff too. For example, right now it assumes Groovy, so you can do JavaScript, but it won't know about it. So So this is pretty nice stuff. So obviously you can edit which is the same as just click on the name of it. You can delete them and you can duplicate it. So if you have scripts that are going to be a little bit different for different projects but are pretty close to the same functionality, you can just duplicate them. We don't support any kind of inheritance. That's kind of just going a little too far. So you can't create one script and then use another script to extend it. It'd be nice, but that's a little too fancy. So are there any other questions on any of this or anything else, actually? As far as a timeline, I said this stuff is. I'm actually in the midst of doing a big refactoring of some of this functionality to get the series import filter stuff, the changes in the series import filter integrated. But otherwise, it is available on the XNAT Builder 1.6 dev repo and Bitbucket. And I should be done with the series import filter stuff fairly soon, today or tomorrow. And because I really want to get back into the 1.7. And so it's worth having a look at if you're curious about it. And then as far as a release for 1.6.5, it will be in the summer, early to middle, hopefully. Our biggest issue is resources, and we should, at the beginning of the summer, have a number of test resources coming back to us, which will be great. So we should be able to go through and validate it, and we'll be piggybacking on the next CNDA upgrade and deployment. So hopefully that will drive us along. We will get a lot of the rough edges of this stuff. So obviously there's issues in a number of areas around the scripts that we're very aware of, but get all the rough edges kind of polished off and get it working smoothly. And in the end, hopefully, all that happens is you come in here and you add a script and you put some code in there and you go over here and you go onto your project and you say, hey, when we do, once we've added the auto QC, run the script that notifies our research coordinator. And in the end, our goal is to be able to actually combine these steps into a whole chain of actions so that you can essentially automate the entire process up until the point that you really do need someone to come up and manually intervene, to go look at it, to go QC it, to do whatever you might need to do requiring manual intervention. But otherwise, automate that workflow through a combination of these little scripts that make these decisions, and kind of turn that into a type of rules engine or business process management engine. So, but that's out there a little bit. That's not tomorrow for sure. So. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, and I know there might be, I understand that there's a latency in how the Q&A thing works on this. Can trying this process out to deal with some of the other issues that we have with other, with the other platforms that we have. See how it works. The nice thing is that
we'd feedback on that too.
I'm sorry, what's that?
We'd welcome feedback on that on the discussion group if you have. Yeah.
If anyone has any, comments on how you think this compares to WebEx in terms of easy use and, those sorts of things, I'd really appreciate it. I want to try to get to something. The nice thing is this does automatically record the Hangout. It's available for people to review later. We've got the marked questions, which actually is kind of one of the really neat features on it. But there are some other issues with it as well. So, okay, well I think that's it, and we will have another one next month. If anyone has anything they're interested in hearing about or finding out about or having someone talk about, just let us know. Send me an email, or or you can comments on our on the discussion group or whatever. So, okay, thanks for coming, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Excellent.
All right.